Hi, I'm Donna King. Welcome to The Debrief. This is Carolina Journal's daily or weekly breakdown of what we're covering every day at Carolina Journal. I'm the editor-in-chief. I'm glad you're tuning in, and if you want to like and follow us, we'll be bringing this to you every week and an inside look, kind of inside baseball of what's going on in North Carolina's capital. On the couches this week, of course, we have Carolina Journal's publisher. We have Amy Cook. Thank you for being here. I'm glad you're here with us. And reporter David Bass, who's been covering a lot of education stuff for us. We're going to come into a lot of what you've been covering this week as well. And then also, of course, Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation. I'm glad you're here as well because we really need your analysis of what's been going on. It's been a crazy week. And then, of course, Alice Balsiger, thank you so much. Glad you're here. You've been a really busy guy.
That's right.
Yeah. You've been covering that Tricia Cotham thing. That's what we're going to be talking about a lot today. Tricia Cotham this week, this was the big news. She made the announcement that she's switching from Democrat to Republican. There was a big press conference over at the NCGOP headquarters this week, and she explained why. Had lots of leadership with her, dressed all in red, saying why she's decided to leave the Democratic Party and become a Republican. Here's what she had to say.
I have decided to change my party affiliation, joining the Republican Party, and have been welcomed with open arms by my colleagues, and I'm glad to call you all my colleagues. As long as I have been a Democrat, the Democrats have tried to be a big tent. But this now where we are, modern-day Democratic Party, has become unrecognizable to me and to so many others throughout this state and this country. The party wants to villainize anyone who has free thought, free judgment, has solutions, who wants to get to work to better our state, not just sit in a meeting and have a workshop after a workshop.
I've been using the term earlier of a governing supermajority. And we've had that, and of course, now we have an outright supermajority. It makes it a little easier, by the way. But we have really worked very hard to work across the aisle to the handful of centrist Democrats who are there to try to build policy agreements, to have discussions.
I fully believe that we're going to have our Democrats stay in line with what we are expecting right now. But I will say, it's up to everybody. And I do want to say, I want people to out themselves to me now so we know what we're up against in 2024, to be honest with you.
You covered this story this week. Tell me what that press conference was like.
Yeah, that's right. So the press conference was very celebratory. It seemed like Republicans were super enthused to be gaining Tricia Cotham into their ranks. She had been working with Republicans on a lot of legislative issues previously. Sometimes she would vote with them, sometimes she wouldn't. But I think they were very glad to have her officially part of their ranks.
Sure. So I noticed that she referred to some of the Republican women standing there with her as my girls. That doesn't seem like a very Republican thing to say. It seems like kind of a Democrat thing to say. But I like it. I mean, maybe they need that in that group.
Yeah, that's right. And later on in the press conference, Senator Vicky Sawyer, who's from Iredell County, she actually mentioned, she called Tricia Cotham the most powerful and effective Democratic legislator from the Mecklenburg area. And I think most of that is due to the relationships that Cotham has built and maintained over the years.
Very interesting. We'll be watching her really closely. Amy, one of the things that I noticed is that she talked about her kids. You know, you've been in public policy for a long time, a mom. When people start calling her kids, that's got to be crossing a line.
That's beyond the pale. There used to be a time, Donna, when you could be in this sphere, in this industry, and your kids were off limits. Right. That has since gone by the wayside. There are no boundaries anymore. And I'm with her. Listen, you start going after my kids, and the National Guard won't be enough to protect you. You do not go after kids, and I'll tell you what, you don't go after a child with the mom there. I mean, right. I don't know what they thought they were going to get from that, but going after children is, they've clearly gone too far. I mean, it is a jump the shark, lost their minds moment.
Sure. And speaking of jump the shark, Twitter, of course, was out of hand over this. David, we talked about this. We have a text thread going on for CJ. Look at some of these texts now. Some of them have now been deleted. This is an interesting one because they're saying now that this is an indicator of white supremacy. that Tricia Cotham is somehow participating in white supremacy because she's a female that's decided to become a Republican.
I mean, that's so predictable these days. I hate to say it, it's predictable. It's almost pedestrian. It's come up with a new shtick. Right. The fact of the matter is, as Representative Cotham said, the Democrat Party left her. She did not leave them. They are a party of grievance and oppression and a bunch of angry women, as shows up in that text, showed up with Clayton Anderson. I mean, Tricia Cotham didn't even feel welcome in a party that she grew up in. Right. I mean, I tell you what, I did the same thing when I was in my mid-30s and had to tell my family, listen, by the way, it's 1994, it was Republican, the contract with America, and my family said, you're not appropriately upset. And I said, it's because I voted a straight party line ticket. And listen,
you came out.
I could have brought home a terrorist and been more popular that day.
Right,
yeah.
right.
So it's a hard thing to do. I give her a lot of credit.
Sure, what she did was truly
Brave.
courageous, actually, because her own mother has said that she is concerned for her daughter's safety, that she's had death threats, that she's woken up with thousands and thousands of messages on her phone. Her kids are getting phone calls. Somebody confronted her children in a Target shopping center. David, some of these texts that we were sending back and forth this week, one of them was from Nita Alam, which I thought was really interesting. She has since removed it. So fortunately, someone screenshot it and was able to capture it. But here's what she said. Thanks for permission to unleash hell on you in 2024. I mean, I can't decide if that's a political threat or a physical threat. What do you think?
Yeah, it was amazing just to be tracking Twitter the day the news was breaking and see, I think what you were getting was a lot of people's real, honest, raw opinion on the matter, and then they would delete it later, but getting that screen capture, it really showed what they were actually feeling. And the interesting thing to me was the news broke the day before the press conference. Right. So you could kind of see some of the reaction initially. And then Representative Cotham gets up in the press conference and starts talking about all these ways that she's been mistreated and all these different things going on. And then you saw another flood of tweets kind of proving her point. Right. So it was just, you saw it before, you saw it afterward, but it was kind of reinforcing what she was saying about the way she had been treated.
Sure, and this whole thing started, it seems like it started a long time ago, but the catalyst was maybe not being able to be there for the veto override on the pistol permit.
Correct, yeah, and it was interesting because she was absent that day because she's, as many people know, she's had COVID 3 times and she's been dealing with long COVID symptoms, so she had a doctor's appointment that day. And you actually had some people on Twitter saying, a symptom of long COVID is basically losing your mind.
Here we
so
go,
maybe she's lost her mind. And just amazing stuff that the kid gloves were off and they were just going after her.
Right, and one thing that I noticed, it was all from women. You know, that's something that really bothered me, is that, you know, it seemed like it was a lot of women that were going after her for the most part. But all of this really doesn't matter, though, if she doesn't vote with them, I guess. Mitch, what are your thoughts about this, what the policy implications could be, and for the governor?
There are going to be a lot of potential implications from this. I think the first thing that we have to think of is when you hear that someone has switched parties, it's usually, I think, a situation like Amy was describing. You realize your thoughts, your ideas about policies have changed or evolved, and the other party fits them better. I'm not sure that's really what happened with Tricia Cotham. Hers was not one of these on the road to Damascus conversions. It was more, she thought that her policy positions could fit within the Democratic Party, and it became increasingly clear that the positions that she has had for many years, if not her whole life, now no longer fit within that party. It's not as if she changed her beliefs or ideas. It was just that those beliefs, which a decade ago, maybe even less, would still have been straight in the middle, mainstream of the Democratic Party, are now on the edge and in some cases unacceptable to the party elites. So I think that particular piece of it tells me that you're not going to be able to go forward and say, okay, Republicans now have 72 votes, 3/5 in the House, which means anything Republicans want to put out, they're going to be able to get through.
Right.
No, they're still going to have to appeal to Tricia Cotham, the same person she was when she was a Democrat. And as Tim Moore alluded to in this news conference, their goal is not just to appeal to the 72 House Republicans, the 30 Senate Republicans, they want to get others on board too. So they want to try to get several more votes within that Democratic caucus, even if the people stay Democrats, to vote with them. I think one of the clear losers here, in many respects, is Governor Roy Cooper. Because, A, it does make it a little bit more likely that if he wants to veto a bill, that there's a chance that it's going to get overridden. But also the way that Tricia Cotham described how the governor approached Democrats in the General Assembly, talking about how he wanted to have a say over where they sat and have all kinds of an input on what legislative Democrats were up to. We have to remember there are 3 separate branches of government. The legislature is supposed to be the most powerful branch. And basically, the governor is stepping in and telling legislative Democrats, do what I want, or I'll do to you what I did to Kirk Deviere, the Cumberland County senator, who he recruited someone to run against in a primary and was successful. And I think that threat is still out there, even though Roy Cooper is wrapping up his last 2 years and can't run again. He's still trying to exert that power. Tricia Cotham was saying, you can't do that with me. As we have said, she said, you picked the wrong chick for that. And that was the Carolina Journal headline on this story.
Right. Yeah, she said you picked the wrong chick, and he's a lame duck. I'm not sure where. I'm trying to find a joke in there somewhere. But, you know, the stakes might be even higher for him, because I'm wondering now, if you're a national Democrat and you see the chairman of the Democratic Governors Association, he's been incredibly successful in that role. He's been able to raise a lot of money, get a lot of governors elected, and perhaps if he does have, if he is looking for higher office, he's not been able to deliver a statewide race for Democrats, and now he's got defection. Do you think we would have seen that if he had another term to run, or do you think people are like, I'm tired of getting pushed around and this is my chance?
I think there could be both answers might be true. It might be the fact that if he had a chance to run for another term, the people would still be afraid because they know that he has this long-term impact on the party organization. But there also might be this case of saying, look, I'm just tired of this. The governor shouldn't be coming into the legislative deliberations and telling legislators what to do. He obviously can't tell the Republicans what to do because they'll tell him to pound sand, but even telling the Democrats what to do. I would be amazed if you didn't see other Democrats saying, look, Governor, you gotta hold off on this. I think we have already seen this to some extent. Over the last 2 years, Governor Cooper signed budget deals that you could be almost certain he didn't really want to sign.
Right.
And the only reason he did was that there were so many Democrats who voted for them, he knew he couldn't sustain a veto. And we've seen that play out a little bit in this legislation. The pistol purchase permit bill, as you mentioned, there was a veto override, but there are several other pieces of legislation that he has vetoed in the past. There was that hotel safety measure, the riot penalties bill that he had vetoed, basically the same bill before. This time he didn't because he saw the numbers. There were enough Democrats who supported him that he didn't think he was going to succeed in a veto. And we also saw that with this bill on the governance of the deaf and blind schools. Right. He basically came out and said, this bill's unconstitutional, which under his role as a person who is sworn to defend the North Carolina and the U.S. constitutions, he should veto it. But he said he wasn't going to veto it because there were too many Democrats who voted for it. Right. So basically, he is seeing that the numbers are not in his favor as they were over the past couple of years. And I think rather than risk the override stamp coming out over and over again, he is deciding to pick his battles a little bit more.
Sure. Now, are you hearing that I heard that there may be other Democrats considering this. Are you hearing that around the building?
So I did hear that originally, and there's been talk of, I think actually Jim Blaine, who is a longtime Berger chief of staff, put out a tweet right after the election saying there could be 1 to 3 House Democrats who are thinking about switching parties. So now we have the one, Cotham.
Right.
I don't know if she was included in that 1 to 3 originally, but two others that have been interesting have been Michael Ray, who's almost like the Joe Manchin of the North Carolina
House.
Analogy. And then Cecil Brockman, who's a newer legislator from Guilford, but has been willing to work with Republicans on a lot of different issues.
And he has come out and said he's not going to switch.
So supposedly, Brockman told the media that he is not wanting to switch. He intends to stay with the Democrats. He wants to see them win, is what he said. And then Michael Ray, I don't know if this is on paper anywhere, but apparently he told reporter Travis Fain, who's with WRAL, that he also does not intend to switch.
Very interesting. Now, one of the things that you were there, Tricia Cotham said, is that she was criticized for her clothes or her hair, things like that. Do you think that was an emotional response, or do you think she's going to be talking about policy? She's going to be engaged. She has a gavel. Is that correct?
That's right. So at the beginning of session, and let's go back too. So
Sure.
so she had been a legislator before for a while. I believe she was first appointed in 2007
Right.
to ironically replace Jim Black, who was a Democrat who got in trouble for paying somebody to come to his side.
Right.
Being a
Right.
Went to
Republican
federal
switch.
prison.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, not just trouble. So yeah, she replaced him in I think 2007, and then she was there until 2016. So she gained a good bit of experience. Sure. And then another side note that was before Cooper took office too. So she might not have had a good working relationship with Cooper and learned some of the ins and outs about that.
Oh, interesting.
But anyways, back to your point. What was your question again?
No, it's fine. I mean, she had a gavel.
She does have a
She was
gavel.
given a leadership role, but that wasn't good. They didn't see that as a good thing.
No, they did not see that as a good thing. I think a lot of them, because she had a history of working there before, and maybe didn't develop a lot of those relationships with the Democrats. I think a lot of them came in very skeptical of her for some reason. But I'm not sure why. A lot of people are questioning her as like a Trojan horse per se amongst the Democrats, but. If you look at her background, like she's been a Democrat for a very long time. She comes from a family of Democrats. She was married to the chairman of the North Carolina Democratic Party. Her mom's a long-time Mecklenburg County commissioner who's a Democrat, and her dad is also a Democrat who I think is the chair of the Mecklenburg Democrats, or used to be.
Yeah, she's been around a lot. So do you think she'll exert much influence?
I think she'll have a ton of influence.
Right.
I think they're going to want her on everything.
Sure.
I think to the point look at how much power Joe Manchin has in the Senate, in the U.S. Senate. I think she'll have a ton of influence. But I'll tell you what, I've said it before, I love her line that she's an independent thinker, and this could be the equivalent of, we often have a joke around here, a pet tiger. It's great until it's not great.
Yeah.
So she could also flip to the other side on certain issues, and she's clearly been a pro-choice Democrat. I don't know how you suddenly become pro-life, but it sounds to me like she is going to be a pro-choice Republican, and so to expect her to suddenly flip on that, well, I mean, I'd be hard-pressed to believe that she'll do that. I think she's going to wield an enormous amount of power, and as an independent thinker, it'll be so much fun to watch.
It really is. It's going to be really interesting. One of the areas where she really, I think, melds with the Republicans is on school choice. She was one of those moderate school choice Democrats, wasn't she?
She was, yeah. And in fact, one of the first signs that we got of maybe what was to come was a week or two ago, Tricia Cotham had retweeted an article talking about the new education savings account in Florida, something very positive of Ron DeSantis, and basically a retweet of a very school choice friendly article. And we noticed that and we were like, this is interesting. What's the next step here? And now we know what the next step was.
And actually, we got a tweet here. Speaking of education, Josh Stein has already thrown his hat in the ring to be in the Democrat primary for governor. He's got the NCAE's endorsement. That is not school choice at all. So, we're seeing her moving across to Republicans. He's going to be working with NCAE as he tries to make a run for the governor's office. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I think what's happening this year is it's setting up in the legislature to be another huge year for school choice.
Sure.
So with that happening heading into the election next year, I think the state is going to be potentially set up with an even larger opportunity scholarship program, which enables low and moderate income families to attend a private school if that's their choice. There's also been proposed this legislative session, which might not get as much traction, the idea of this ESA, which would potentially create an account that parents would fully have control over. So the dollars would actually be following the student in that case. So both of those ideas have been proposed. Which one gains traction remains to be seen, but it's pretty clear that building on past momentum, this is going to be another big year.
Sure, and she may be in their camp for some of those things. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tell me about ESAs. What is that? Tell me what that would do.
Well, I mean, basically, if you have an education savings account, it basically tells parents that you're going to have this money that you can use for any types of things that you wouldn't normally get in a public school setting. You could pay for tutoring or other things, or your private school tuition.
But it's not their money. It's not money they're putting in. It's money that the state is.
Well, there are different ways to go about it.
Okay.
Some cases you could put money in. In other cases, it'll be money you'll get from the state.
Okay.
There are different ways to go about it, but the idea is the money is yours to use as you, the parent, want to use. It's not the old standard situation of there's a school right here. We, the government, tell you your kid's going to go there.
Right.
And that's the only education you're going to get unless you want to pay more than you're already paying for the thing that we're sending you to.
Right.
And so an ESA gives a lot more flexibility there. The interesting thing, I think, from what David was talking about to me is that school choice has been, I think, the issue that really helped Democrats have concerns about Tricia Cotham, because in the interim of the time that she was away from the General Assembly, from 2016 until she was reelected, that was an issue. I don't remember her being a school choice advocate during her first run at the General Assembly. If she was, it wasn't something she really touted. But I think this is something she has come to accept and be supportive of. And that is almost verboten in today's Democratic Party. You have to be towing the North Carolina Association of Educators line that all we need is more money for the traditional public schools, more pay for teachers. Don't make them work hard. If there's ever any pandemic, don't make them do anything. Just have them sit at home, and the kids will sit at home. And if anything happens in education, oh well.
Take the year off.
and learning loss is just a construct.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if they don't learn anything at the schools. Whereas Tricia Cotham has come out as a very staunch supporter of school choice. And I think when she came back to the General Assembly, the people in the Democratic Party who had seen what she had said and done on that issue looked at her a little bit sideways.
Sure.
We heard during that news conference that ever since she got back to the General Assembly, didn't look like she was in the same place as those other Democrats. She couldn't get a meeting with the Minority Leader, Robert Reeves, who apparently later in a news conference said, "That's not true. We've been friends for years." And, but
We
anyway,
texted at Thanksgiving.
yeah, exactly. So there's that. And then once she got a chairmanship of the K-12 Education Committee, which is the gavel we were talking about, then she said that the Democrats, her own party, rather than celebrating it as a chance to influence the legislation Republicans are working on, instead they decided to set up another member to be her shadow committee chairperson who would watch what she was doing.
That's so alarming.
Yeah.
It really is.
So I think school choice was one of the things that helped drive Tricia Cotham, as we would say, to the right idea, but helped drive her away from her old party.
Very interesting. Yeah, of course. Now, another bill that was filed today, fairness in women's sports. I know that bill is coming up now. Senator Vicky Sawyer is one of the co-sponsors of it. But basically, it says that if you can have 3 kinds of teams in high schools, and it can be an all-female team, all-male team, or a co-ed team. Why is that controversial?
That's a good question. We've been seeing this across the country. We've been seeing problems with biological men playing in the sports of biological women and typically just dominating.
Right.
And so it's been a problem for female sports. And so I think this bill is to try to combat that and protect women's sports.
Sure. So one of the things that it has in this, Amy, is it's got a little teeth. It says that you are liable for remedies if a school board or a principal does not adhere to the all-female, all-male, or co-ed structure. It means that the female student or male student could sue if they were somehow harmed by that, injured in a game, missed the opportunity for a championship, missed a scholarship, whatever. I think that this is interesting. Do you think it's overdue, or do you think it has legs here?
Good.
Yeah.
They're men. Those are men who are acting as women, but they are biological men, and there is in no arena should they be competing with biological women. So biological men should should compete against biological men, and biological women should compete against biological women. That's why all the time trials, whether it's track and field or swimming or anything else, why there are different times.
Sure.
A woman cannot swim as fast as a man in a pool once you get to a certain age. Before that, when they're 8 years old, the girls all swim faster. But once they get to like 12 years old, the boys are all swimming faster.
Right.
It is simple biology. I'm glad to see it, and it's long overdue. The fact that we even have to have a conversation about it is just goes to show you how far this has gone. Can you imagine being a woman, a young woman, and being, you have had the record, or you were going to be the state track star with a scholarship, and you get bumped off the podium because of a biological male who might be mediocre in his own group, but he dominates women.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it.
Sure.
You dominated a bunch of girls.
I
can't even get over
it surprises me how many women are in favor of allowing biological males to compete. I don't know if it's because we have embraced our role as caretakers so much that we're teaching our girls that man's discomfort in his own skin means that is more important than your right to compete.
Then your right to compete
that
fairly.
You should always be second no matter what if that man is uncomfortable. I mean, not to
we can
turn this into a women's thing.
The
but
poor guys on the set.
I know.
Plus, we're the mothers of daughters.
And I guess that's,
you know what? It is infuriating. I worked too long and too hard for them to now have to compete on a playing field with a man.
Sure. Interesting.
Well, and one other point that's important to note on this is when you're talking about the competition, we're talking about people who are competitive.
Right.
My best guess is that all of these young women are going to beat me at any sport. It's just that they can't beat the biological men who are competitive.
Right.
I mean,
right.
So that's why you have the two different sets. So you have people who have the same sort of biological conditions competing against each other. It's not because men are better than women, women are inferior. That's not it. It's that you want to have two like groups competing against each other. And when you have biological men competing with biological women, you don't get that.
And it's also boring, right? I mean, the other thing is you want good competition.
Right.
A 20-year-old man competing against a 20-year-old woman, even at the top of their game, he's still going to beat her probably 9 times out of 10, right? I mean, it's predictable and it's boring.
But this does allow for a co-ed team. So if schools say, we're not going to accept this, we're not going to do this, we're going to make all our teams co-ed, it does allow them to do that.
Great. Or have a transgender team. Do whatever, but women should compete against women, men against men. And you're right. Then you have they have co-ed cheerleading teams.
Co-ed track, whatever. Yeah. Very interesting. This has been a really good conversation. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Like and follow this. We'll be bringing it to you each week. And thanks for joining us on The Debrief.